Rien is a worthless hero who got betrayed by his teammates who thought he was weak. However, everything changes when he tames overpowered beast girls to get revenge, but finds out they'll do anything to please him too. It all starts with Rien suddenly getting fired by the leader of his party. After taking a moment to remember how he has helped the team with his beast taming abilities, he asks if they are joking, but upon realizing that Arios is actually serious, he asks why. A magic user named Lean then calls him the most useless piece of human trash they have ever dealt with. After they all take turns talking about how they always had to save him during missions, Arios tells him to drop his gear because he was also too broke to afford good equipment. Several minutes later, he finds a bench to sit on and realizes that all the times they were harsh during missions was because they always hated him. Just then, 3 of his fans show up and beg to see his skill, so he quickly tames a bird and makes it greet them before releasing it from his contract. He goes on to explain how he forms contacts with animals, but their underdeveloped brains struggle to process the information, so they skip the tutorial to tell him that they all want to become beast tamers in the future. This surprises him since everyone usually wants to be a hero, but then they explain that Arios and the others in his party always look down on regular people and only respect those with money. After they say that being an adventurer is way better, Rien takes a moment to think about it and realizes that being independent and free to make money with his skills is the right thing for him. Shortly after that, he arrives at the Adventurers Guild, where a receptionist named Natalie welcomes him and offers to explain the trail he has to pass to become one. However, when he asks for a detailed explanation of what an adventurer is, she gets surprised and says people mostly focus on how much money they can make instead of what the actual job is. She then explains the adventurer ranking system, as well as the jobs he can take at each level, before saying that he has to murk 10 goblins and collect 20 special herbs to officially become one. Later that day, he locates a pack of goblins and easily cuts them down. But after gathering the crystals, he hears screams from inside the forest and rushes inside to see a ranked tiger about to eat an innocent-looking girl. Despite knowing that there is nothing he can do, he attacks the tiger with a butter knife and acts surprised when it snaps like a twig. As the tiger then decides to eat him instead, he tells the girl to make a run for it, but she suddenly channels the little energy she has left into a powerful jump and shatters the tiger's spine with a drop kick. After taking a close look at her, Rien realizes that he just came in contact with a cat spirit, which happens to be the rarest of all the ultimate species. The next moment, the tiger becomes pixie dust, so he runs in to catch Canade, who then starts begging him for food. Moments later, she finishes his snack bars and says she was about to go see her grandparents in heaven because she had not eaten in days. After a proper introduction, he asks why she is starving herself in a random forest, so she explains how she decided to leave her isolated village to experience life. A couple minutes after that, he gives every detail of the verbal abuse he suffered at the hands of his former party, and she suddenly gets upset by how unfairly he was treated. This surprises him, so he tells her not to bother feeling bad because he is the one who was too weak to keep up with them. When Canade claims that he is actually really powerful, he gets even more surprised, so she explains that she sensed some of his power when they first met before telling him to try and tame her. He initially thinks that there is no way he can tame an ultimate species, but after deciding that he at least wants to spend more time with her, he starts the ritual and actually manages to pull it off. She then tries to run off with him, but he stops to complete his adventure trial and creates contracts with a group of bunnies before sending him off to do all the work for him. This shocks Canade, and when she tells him that regular beast tamers can only handle one animal at a time, he claims that there is nothing special about his abilities. Back at the guild several minutes later, Natalie looks through all the items he gathered to make sure they are legit, before making him an official adventurer and handing over his identification card. After also giving him some coins for completing the trial, she admits that it might be a bit small, but promises that he will be stacking bread in no time, as long as he continues improving his skill. Despite her motivational speech, Rien gets worried as he realizes that it's going to take a lot more than good vibes to build a good life as an adventurer, so he walks over to Canade and asks if she is down to start taking jobs already. As soon as she says yes, the human version of Scar shows up and asks why a cat spirit is hanging out with such a pathetic weakling. After she calls him stupid for failing to realize that Rien is actually a really powerful beast tamer, he decides to challenge Rien to an arm wrestle and says he will be taking Canade after winning. Instead of giving a corny speech about how women are not properties to be fought over, Rien decides to give the people what they want and gets seated for the match. The next moment, he smashes the scar-faced idiot's hand into the table and struggles to understand how he got so strong, while the wannabe thug squirms in pain. After Natalie explains that they have been considering revoking his license, she asks Rien how on earth he came in contact with a cat spirit, so they both grab each other out of fear that she is about to punish them. However, after saying that he is sure to get stronger in the coming months, she wishes them luck and drags Scarface out of the building. Upon seeing that Rian is still confused about the sudden increase in his strength level, Canade explains that setting up the contract gave him access to all her abilities. She then gets excited for the next mission until they start picking through weeds to find another batch of medicinal herbs. When she asks why he isn't taking on high-level quests, he reminds her that he just got his license and is still only an franked adventurer. Just as she decides to give it her all regardless of how boring the job is, he tames another group of bunnies to gather everything they need, and she gets upset because of how useless she has been since he tamed her. After telling her not to worry, he suggests heading back to the guild to find another job, but she suddenly hears some commotion in the distance and tells him that someone is in danger. Moments later, they arrive at the scene and watch as an old man gets threatened by a large group of thugs. When Canade says they should go find help, Rian tells her that it will be too late by the time they get back. As soon as she realizes what he plans to do, they both charge in and drop the entire group in less than a minute. They then ask the old man why he was traveling without escorts, and after saying that they all ran away when the thugs first showed up, he tells Rian that they have to get as far away as possible because no one has ever stood up to their group and lived to tell the tale. Upon hearing this, Rian takes a moment to think of a rational solution and decides that the best move will be to capture every single member of the group. As he walks off to get started on the plan, Canade reminds him that there are at least 100 thugs he would have to fight, but Rian claims it won't be a problem because he has the perfect plan to take care of them. Outside their hideout a couple minutes later, he introduces her to a highly poisonous species of bees and says he will tame a whole bunch of them to knock all the goons unconscious until she returns with reinforcements. He then tells her to get as many adventurers as she can, as well as the Order of Knights, and after she runs off, he summons his army of bees to get started. Meanwhile, Lean and Mina, who turn out to be the escorts the old man hired, have just stopped running and take a moment to catch their breaths before Mina grabs an NP beast tamer they hired to ask why he didn't serve as their human shield. After he tells them that beast tamers do not engage in combat missions, Mina asks why he only tamed one squirrel when there are dozens running around, but he suddenly gets shocked and asks how they can expect him to do the impossible. While he explains how regular beast tamers can only handle one animal at a time, Rian easily commands his army of bees to sting all the thugs in the hideout until they pass out. Lean then threatens the beast tamer to take the fall for their epic fail, and after he runs off, Mina claims that there is no way Rian was actually powerful just because he could tame multiple animals. Several minutes later, Canade returns with a bunch of adventurers from the guild, who then tell Rian that the Order of Knights refused to help. With their help, they tie up all the thugs, but just as he and Canade start celebrating their victory, they hear a loud roar before 3 king lizards break out of their cage and start attacking every person in sight. After Rian tells the adventurers to wait outside, he and Canade engage the C-rank beasts in an epic battle royale that goes on until late evening. At one point, the adventurers start to worry that they might not make it out alive, but when they both walk out with crystals obtained from the defeated lizards, the adventurers surround them to celebrate, causing Rian to realize that he has come a long way from being the weakling Arios fired. At the guild later on, Natalie presents him with a fat bag of coins as a reward for the takedown, before promoting him to rank E for all his efforts. He then takes Canade out to shop for fresh gear and makes a stop at the best restaurant in town to enjoy the best dinner money can buy. However, when they finally find a hotel to spend the night, the happiness fades away after he learns that they will have to share a room together. As Canade immediately jumps into the bed and expresses how excited she is to finally be sleeping indoors, he decides to go sleep outside, but she stops him from leaving and says she doesn't mind spending the night with him. Upon hearing this, Rian tells her to stop trusting him so easily because his glizzy might make him do unholy things in the night. But she still insists that it won't be a problem and says he is too nice to do something like that. He then decides to give her a quick lesson on how dangerous men can be so she can understand why Jen's chicks prefer being alone with bears. Despite this, she still refuses to let him sleep outside and explains how he is the only guy that has made her feel safe after she left her village, so he agrees to share the room. Over a week later, they both complete an average quest, but when they return to the guild to receive payment, Natalie tells them about a guard dog that has been attacking anyone that tries to cross the central bridge. After she explains how all the victims end up needing hospital care, Canade begs Rian to accept the quest, but he tells her to forget about it because such a mission will probably be left to top-ranked adventurers. Just then, Natalie explains that it's actually an open quest for anyone interested, but Rian still remains skeptical until she tells him that the reward is 5 gold coins. Shortly after that, he and Canade arrive at the bridge, and after gushing about how large it is, she asks if he has any idea of who or what the guard dog is. After he reminds her that all the victims were too scared to talk for some reason, they both see a dragon in the sky and nearly faint from shock. However, after dropping onto the bridge, Tanya switches to her human form and introduces herself as one of the ultimate species called Dragonoids before challenging them to a duel. Reen then asks if she is the guard dog sending people to the ISU, and when she says that it's all a part of her training, Canade explains that Dragonoids leave their hometown to start a long period of training once they reach a certain level. This causes Reen to start second-guessing his decision to accept the quest, but Canade reminds him that she is also one of the ultimate species, so he regains his confidence and accepts Tanya's challenge. The next moment, she charges in to attack him, and although he manages to block it, he quickly realizes why no one else could defeat her. After commending him on being strong enough to survive her weakest attack, she pushes him back and decides to get serious. As soon as they see the blast building up in her mouth, they jump back to dodge it, but Canade still ends up with a burnt tail. This causes her to get mad, so she charges in to unleash a flurry of blows, while Reen accepts that he is just too weak to take her down on his own. He then decides to join Canade, but Tanya easily blocks both of their attacks before grabbing them by the leg and throwing them as far up as she can. The next moment, they see her preparing another blast, but this one ends up being a lot more powerful than her first and almost turns them into barbecue wings. However, when the smoke clears, Tanya sees that they managed to dodge at the last moment and compliments their skill before saying that no one has ever lasted this long against her. Reen then decides to stop using just Canade's skills and tells her to buy him some time before running off, so she decides to take things up a notch and attacks Tanya with a powerful punch that almost blasts a hole through the bridge. Tanya manages to dodge it, but Canade immediately baits her in another flurry of punches, while Reen climbs one of the bridge towers to make a contract with a special species of birds. Moments later, Canade runs out of combinations to use on Tanya, but Reen finally returns and sends his birds to peck at every exposed part of her body. After chasing them off, she calls him stupid for thinking such an attack could leave a scratch on her, but after her entire body suddenly goes numb, he explains that they are actually a highly toxic species of birds, which is why he needed a whole bunch just to paralyze a dragon. When she suddenly admits defeat, they get surprised, so she asks if there is anything else she can do when her entire body has just been turned off. After Canade jumps on Reen to celebrate, he makes Tanya agree to take her training elsewhere before they go back to the guild to give Natalie the good news. As usual, she starts glazing harder than Taylor Swift fans and promises to get his coins once they verify that he actually took down the feared guard dog. The next moment, she notices Tanya and tries to ask if she is a Dragonoid, but he quickly intercepts and claims she is a random NPC in a costume. On the way out, he then tries to explain how dangerous it would be if everyone knew who she was, but then they see her picking a fight with a random knight and showing off her tail to the locals. At an open field a couple minutes later, Reen explains the importance of keeping her identity secret and suggests going to a different place so she can continue her training without getting into trouble. When Canade asks why all her victims didn't want to say anything, she reminds them that no one likes getting beat up by a baddie and suddenly asks if she can join their party. They both get surprised by the sudden request, so she explains that going on quests with them will serve as the perfect training before grabbing Reen and admitting that she likes him. Canade immediately gets jealous and tries to stop her, but after Reen says that he has no problem with it, she reluctantly accepts. Reen then enters a contract with Tanya, and after he completes the ritual, Canade explains what the sign on her hand means, and she gladly decides to address him as her master. Hours later, Arios and his party of weaklings return from another failed mission and start to realize that Reen wasn't as useless as they made him out to be. Arios then decides to get him back so they can use him just until they complete a special mission they have coming up. Days later, Reen and the girls set out on a new quest to hunt down a swarm of slimes, and after several minutes of searching the woods, Canade starts complaining about it, so Tanya asks if she is scared of them. After she explains how their mushy bodies would always stick to her whenever she encountered them, Tanya claims it wouldn't be a problem for her since she can just roast them from a distance. Reen then reminds them that they have to find the slimes first before suddenly deciding to try looking from the sky. They both get confused and wonder how he plans to do that until he unleashes a special ability on a random bird and passes out. They immediately try to wake him up and worry that he might have just murked himself until he starts speaking from the bird's body and explains that he just transferred his consciousness to it. After telling them to watch over his body, he takes off and finally locates the slimes. Moments later, Canade grabs a boulder to smash them, but Tanya stops her and asks Reen if he has ever created a fireball. He then remembers trying it once several years ago and says he has always been weak at elemental magic, but she tells him to try attacking the slimes with it. When a single blast nearly opens up a crater in the forest floor, he gets confused and wonders how he became strong, so Tanya explains that taming her also gave him access to her powers the exact same way it did for Canade. He is still surprised by the sudden increase in his magic level, but when Tanya says it shouldn't be a problem for her master, he decides to lock in and asks if she can help him master it. Tanya then spends the rest of the day barking orders at him while he struggles to adjust to his new power level. Later on, they get back into town, and as the girls decide to wait outside the guild for Reen, a local girl shows up to ask about their mission for the day. After they tell her about the slimes, she thanks them for all the help because it was her parents' farm they always attacked. They all keep talking until Reen comes out with the money they earned and ends up having to spend every dime on the buffet they both order for dinner. When they finally clear out every crumb on their plates, Tanya asks Reen where he learned beast taming, and Canade also says she has been curious to know how he got so good at it. Reen then tells him about his hometown, where everyone was a beast tamer, and how he spent every day training until the entire village got destroyed. It all started like every other day with his parents, who were also beast tamers. Unlike the usual training he would do with an elder or friend, Reen decided to go out to the woods to work on the skills he had already learned. By the time he finished for the day, it was already sundown, but then he got curious about a bright light shining in the distance and realized that it was coming from his village. He immediately bolted back home, but by the time he got there, it was already too late, as everything had been burnt down. By sunrise the next day, a bunch of adventurers showed up on the scene to rescue him, and one of them helped him find a place to stay. However, he now had to spend his nights on the cold floor after long days of brutal labor just to keep himself fed. When Arios saw him one afternoon and offered to make him a member of his party, he gladly accepted it and thought life was finally about to get better. Unfortunately, he learned the hard way that they only saw him as a tool to help make their mission a little easier. After apologizing for the sad story, Reen tells the girls that he has long accepted his weak nature. But Canade reminds him of all the times he fought to protect her and says he has only ever wanted to shield people from the cruel life he endured. Tanya also admits to liking how kind and thoughtful he is, before getting pissed at Arios for being too stupid to realize that they disregarded the best thing to ever happen to their party. The following day, they head out for a quest to take out a bunch of orcs, and Canade decides to challenge Tanya to see who can defeat the most enemies. After she easily roasts a whole group of them, Reen reminds her that the orcs are actually smart, but she ignores him and says they are still too stupid to survive against her. Just a couple minutes later, she spots one lying beside a boulder, and just as she gets close to finishing it off, it grabs her leg until she falls. She still manages to murk it, but a second one suddenly attacks from behind. Luckily, Reen jumps in and gets stabbed in the arm before Canade claps the orc. Tanya immediately apologizes for not looking, but Reen tells her not to worry and heals himself. Shortly after that, he submits the crystals to Natalie at the guild before Canade tells him that Tanya suddenly left to be by herself. At abridged moments later, a girl sees her and asks if she had any epic takedown, but upon noticing her sad mood, she tells her to speak up if anything is troubling her and wishes her luck before running off. Just as she realizes that Reen was only looking out for her when he warned her earlier on, he shows up to talk to her. She then apologizes for getting him hurt again and promises to listen properly next time, but he starts rubbing her head and tells her not to worry about something so simple. After Canade also catches up to them and hugs her, they return to the hotel, and Reen ends up sleeping on the floor so they can both enjoy the bed. This causes Tanya's feelings for him to reach new heights, and after staring at him for a couple minutes, she notices a warm and fuzzy feeling in her special spot, and so she covers him up properly to avoid any temptation. The following afternoon, they easily complete another mission and try to decide between getting more equipment or another buffet when Arios shows up with the rest of his former party members. Reen immediately tells the girls to follow a separate path, but Arios stops him and asks why he is being so cold after all they have been through as a party. Upon hearing this, the girls ask if he is the hero that fired Reen, and he immediately tries to brush them off before receiving the shock of his life when he realizes what they are. When Canade says they are party members, Arios asks if they also hired him as a slave like they did, but Canade gets pissed and warns him against disrespecting her master. They all struggle to believe their ears and wonder how the pathetic Reen managed to get such powerful hotties to join him. Arios then reminds him of a quest they plan to take into the Lost Woods and explains how difficult it has been to get deeper into the woods without having someone to carry all their bags. When he offers to let him join the party again so he can return to being their glorified busboy, Reen gets upset and asks how they even expect him to say yes after what they did. After Arios responds by reminding him that everyone wants to join the hero's party, Reen then coldly rejects the offer and starts heading out with the girls, but Mina stops him to explain how important the mission is. When she mentions the Demon King, Reen suddenly gets intrigued, so she tells him about a special shield hidden by monsters deep in the Lost Woods, which they need to even stand a chance against the Demon King. She goes on to give him a detailed explanation of the kind of destruction mankind will face if they fail to stop the Demon King. And this causes Reen to remember how he felt when his village got burned down, so he reluctantly agrees to help them. They then try to lead him back to their base, but Canade stops them and demands a proper apology for the disrespect they showed him. Upon hearing this, Arios claims that he already said sorry, so Tanya takes over and reminds them of the humiliation Reen suffered before telling them to stick their heads in the dirt and beg for his forgiveness. Just then, Arios completely loses it and says he will never bow to such a worthless failure. Agef also claims that they did nothing wrong, while Lean and Mina continue saying that Reen should be grateful for the opportunity they just gave him. After suddenly grabbing Reen by the collar, Arios tells him to get his pets under control, and when Reen asks if he really just called the girls his pets, Arios doubles down and calls him a psycho for thinking they are better than humans just because they are the ultimate species. He then admits that they are attractive, but just as he calls Reen an animal-loving creep, Reen fractures his face with a brutal punch and warns him against disrespecting the girls again. Arios then decides to settle the scores once and for all with a duel between their parties, and Reen happily agrees to it. Moments later, Canade prepares to fight Agath and promises to make him apologize to Reen, but he still insults Reen and drops his megaton sword to show off how strong he is. After he expresses excitement to be finally fighting one of the ultimate species, Canade charges in and unleashes a flurry of powerful punches that almost shatter the sword. When she asks if he is too weak to counter, he gets pissed and powers up his sword for a deadly slice, but she casually kicks it away, leaving him frozen in shock. However, after she expresses her disappointment and says she didn't expect him to be such a weakling, he decides to go all out and apologizes in advance if the attack sends her up to the Lord. Upon hearing this, Canade starts stretching and decides to use almost half her strength just to respect the fact that he is going all out. This sends shivers down Agath's spine as his mind gets flooded with fear. Just as he asks why such a powerful person is running around with Reen, she responds with a flying kick that shatters every blood vessel. While Canade then realizes that she might have used a little too much power for the bald weakling, Tanya gets ready to fight Mina and Lean. After saying that she would have loved to beat Arios up, she offers to go easy on them since she usually doesn't pick fights with useless weaklings, but they promise to take her down and begin preparing powerful spells. As soon as they let off the blasts, Tanya cancels it with a snap of her fingers, and they both start trying to figure out what kind of trick she used. The confused look on their faces causes her to start laughing, so they decide to try again, but she does the exact same thing and explains her ability to cancel any magic spell. Despite this, the sore losers still make the mistake of thinking they have a shot and power up for their most powerful attacks yet. This time, Tanya cancels it as soon as it materializes and decides to show them what real magic looks like. Upon seeing the countless earth spears about to crush them, they both start begging for their lives, but Tanya stops at the last moment and reveals that it was just an illusion. However, they still passed out from the trauma, so she tells them to be grateful that Reen isn't a wicked master because she would have loved to see what they look like after being burned alive. By then, Arios has just started another narcissistic speech about his greatness, so Reen tries to punch him again and says he is tired of listening to whatever nonsense he has to say. After promising to make him regret his choice of words, Arios attacks with an incredibly fast sword skill and manages to cut his face, so Reen starts evading. When Arios tries to mock him for still being too weak to counter, Reen notices that he isn't actually that strong for a hero, so he grabs him by the arm and asks if he has any other trick to show off before delivering a nasty body shot that forces him back. Arios immediately resumes his attack and asks Reen how on earth he is dodging them, so Reen explains how he mastered his every move during the time they worked together and demonstrates some of the power he got from Canade by landing a painful kick to the side. He then tells Arios to admit defeat while he still can, but the arrogant dimwit decides to take it a step further by unleashing his lightning magic. After Reen blocks it with Tanya's fireball, Arios decides to overwhelm him with every spell he learned from Lean. But then Reen suddenly gets distracted just as he charges in for the final strike. All of a sudden, Arios' entire body goes numb, so Reen reminds him that he can also tame insects before showing him the bee he summoned when they first started the duel. As he prepares to repay him for all the disrespect, Arios starts begging and tries to remind him of all the good times they shared together. But after thinking back on how they always treated him like trash, Reen delivers a punch that almost obliterates his skull. Thankfully, he managed to hold back at the last second, and after he admits that revenge feels extremely good, the girls run out to reunite with him. Barely a couple hours after that, they make it into the Lost Woods, but Canade starts feeling skeptical about the mission, so Tanya offers to burn everything in sight. After Rien stops her, they decide to focus on finding the shield of truth Arios was talking about. But when he compares the map they gave him to the current lay of the woods, it becomes clear that they have to find a new way inside on their own. When they both start asking why he has to help Arios, he reminds them that only a hero can defeat the Demon King, which is why he must wield the shield. He then rubs their heads and thanks them for always looking out for him before coming up with a plan to find their own way into the woods. After calling a bird over, he swaps consciousness with it like before and takes off to map out a new path. Moments later, he returns to his body, but within a couple minutes of setting out on the path he found, they come across a stone they placed at the start and realize that they have been walking in circles. Tanya then activates a magic tracing skill that leads them to a tree filled with illusion magic. As she tries to explain how its magic works, Canade's brain almost implodes from the information overload, so she summarizes it before telling Canade to destroy the tree. When Rien asks why she can't just cancel out the magic like she did with Lean and Mina, she explains that magic of this level will take a lot of time and will probably leave her feeling extremely drained of energy. This causes Canade to realize that she just doesn't want Rien to look bad in front of Arios again, so she agrees to destroy the tree, but the moment she gets close enough, a voice warns her to stay away. The next moment, a fairy emerges from the tree and orders them to leave. Upon seeing her, Rien freezes in shock because fairies were last seen over 2 centuries ago after a war against humans. As soon as the shock wears off, he tries to reason with her, but she continues ordering them to leave and finally threatens to make sure she is the last thing he sees. After several minutes of running, Tanya and Canade try to figure out why they just got attacked by one of the ultimate species. So Rien explains their hatred towards humans, but says she shouldn't have even shown herself to them so casually. Canade then reminds him of the monsters rumored to be keeping the shield and says she might be working with them. When Tanya says they should just go back and finish what they started with force, Rien suggests talking with the fairy instead. They both get surprised by the fact that he can even think of that after she almost murked him, but he insists that they just need to try a soft approach and convinces them to at least give it a shot. Moments later, they return to the tree, but he steps forward first to speak with Sora. Like before, she starts threatening to attack if he doesn't leave, and when he asks if they can have a conversation about it, she refuses and prepares to unleash some of her magic. After stopping the girls from interfering, he tells Sora to take her best shot if that will help her trust him. So she attacks him with a flurry of arrows but only manages to scratch him up. Upon seeing that he still has a warm smile on his face, she asks if he is really a human like the ones that threatened to destroy their lands all those years ago. He then admits that humans can be greedy but explains that not all of them are out for blood. However, she still refuses to trust him and tries to attack again, so Canade and Tanya jump in to protect him. The way they easily choose to sacrifice themselves causes Sora to have second thoughts, so she decides to hear him out and properly introduces herself. Minutes later, they finish explaining their quest to obtain the Shield of Truth and ask if she can take down the barrier, but she refuses and explains that it protects the path to her homeland. When Tanya asks if she is just covering for the monster holding the shield, she claims that there are no monsters in the Lost Woods and proves it by teleporting into her village to fetch the shield. After casually handing it over, she explains that they have been the ones protecting it for the past few centuries and says she is only giving it to them because they hate monsters more than humans. Rien then thanks her for the help and asks if they can offer her anything in return, but she rejects the offer and tells him to leave. However, just as Tanya and Canade start heading out, he returns to speak with Sora and promises that he can handle whatever is on her mind. Despite this, she stops herself from telling him out of a fear that he would only put himself in danger. But he once again assures her that he can handle anything. After Tanya and Canade say the same thing, she tells them about Runa, her twin sister, who was assigned to guard the barrier with her. One certain day, they got bored of just sitting around and decided to take a walk through the woods, but it ended up being their worst mistake as they ran into a Shadow Knight that ended up capturing Runa. Seeing as the ultimate species are the only ones capable of standing against the Demon King on their own, the knight demanded to pass through the barrier in exchange for Runa's freedom, but Sora refused and ran home to ask their leader for help. Unfortunately, the leader told her to accept Runa's kidnapping as punishment for their actions. After realizing that she must have been miserable on her own all this time, Rien promises to save Runa and defeat the Shadow Knight without putting her homeland in danger. Sora then runs into his arms to express her gratitude before revealing that the Shadow Knight gave her until the end of the day to take down the barrier, or he would send Runa to an early grave. When Rien tells her not to worry and turns to leave, She offers to tag along, but he stops her and explains that seeing her there will only cause the Shadow Knight to attack Runa. After agreeing to stay, Sora then gives them directions to where the knight had been waiting, and they find him in just a couple of minutes. The next moment, Reen shoots out a fireball, but the Shadow Knight barely flinches and calls him stupid for not realizing that spells don't work on him. However, after Canade lands a brutal kick followed by a punch from Reen, they claim to already know about his resistance. The knight then asks Reen why he would choose to fight him despite knowing how powerful he is. As Reen tries to avoid the question, the knight notices that Canade had been glancing over at Runa and realizes that Sora sent them to rescue her, so he decides to cut her down. Thankfully, Tanya blocks his attack and quickly escapes with Runa, so they can focus on defeating him. Upon realizing that he just got played, the knight loses it and unleashes a powerful skill that threatens to destroy the entire forest. Reen then tells Canade to prepare for one final attack, and when she says it might not be strong enough, he tells her not to worry and summons a group of bees. By the time Canade runs out of tricks to stop the knight, Reen overwhelms him with the bees and takes the opportunity to boost Canade's strength level with a powerful spell. With her abilities increased to the max, she delivers a nasty body shot with every ounce of energy left in her body and opens a hole right through the knight's insides, causing him to shatter into pixie dust. She then runs over to Reen and asks how he pulled off something so powerful. So he explains that he actually learned the spell in his hometown but couldn't use it until he acquired Tanya's magic. Just then, Tanya returns to commend him, and as soon as Runa regains consciousness, they take her back to the tree to reunite with Sora. After the sisters high-five each other, Sora asks if there is anything she can do to repay the favor, but they tell her not to worry. Runa also thanks them before suddenly talking about all the freaky stuff the knight could have done to her. She takes it a step further by asking Reen if he thought about her fairy cakes getting clapped, but he gets shocked by the unusual question, so Sora starts chasing her around to stop her from teasing him. Moments later, the girls ask if they are happy to be guarding their hometown together again, but Sora reveals that she actually wants to leave because she can't forgive the way they all betrayed Runa to save themselves. After agreeing with her, Runa admits that they would only end up in more danger since they barely know anything about the outside world, so Canade asks if they would like to join the party. Tanya also agrees that it would be a great idea, and after the sisters decide to trust Reen regardless of their history with humans, he also agrees to it. The next moment, they both ask to be tamed, but he starts doubting himself because taming two fairies at once is something he never thought was possible. Tanya and Canade notice this and remind him that he is a lot stronger than before, so he decides to give it a shot. After taking a moment to figure out the contract spell, he starts the process and manages to pull it off. However, after they both see the contract symbol on their hands, he realizes that it took a lot of energy and almost falls unconscious. Luckily, the sisters hold him up, and as they start offering to take care of him anytime he wants, Tanya and Canade realize that they might have underestimated how freaky the twins can be. A couple hours later, they return to town, and Reen immediately goes to hand over the shield to Arios, but he refuses to believe that they were able to complete the quest so quickly. After Mina appraises it with her magic and realizes that it's legit, Arios notices the twins hiding and tries to ask who they are, but Reen quickly distracts him because of the conflict between humans and fairies. He then demands the payment they agreed on, and as soon as Arios hands it over, he turns to leave, but Agath suddenly asks if he would like to join their party again. Arios immediately tries to stop him, but Agath tells him to stop acting like they don't need the help. Mina and Lean also agree that they need Reen, so Agath walks up to explain all the benefits of working together again and also promises that they will stop treating him like a slave. However, the memory of all the times they disrespected him still causes him to get pissed, so Canade and Tanya tell him not to bother responding to them. Agath then reminds him of the great reward waiting for the heroes' party after they defeat the Demon King, but Reen turns down the offer and says he already has all he needs. After he walks out, Agath calls him stupid for rejecting such an amazing offer and acts like they don't need him anymore. Mina and Lean also support his delusion, but as they set out to prepare for the mission, Arios reminisces on his embarrassing defeat and swears to make sure Reen suffers for insulting him. By then, Reen and the girls had just found some shade under a tree, and when the twins ask why only Arios can face the Demon King, he decides to give them a history lesson. Many years ago, the Demon King took control of all humanity with his vast power to make sure no one could stand against him. The hero at the time then made a pact with the gods and received some of their blood, which gave him a limit break skill that increased his powers until he was strong enough to save all of humanity. His power was then passed down through his offspring and currently resides in Arios, which means that he will eventually become strong enough to face the Demon King. After the crash course, the twins tell Rien that he might also have a skill similar to Limit Break because he levels up anytime he tames a new species. Canade and Tanya also agree, so they all suggest that he takes on the Demon King instead of leaving it up to Arios and his party of losers. Despite the pep talk, Rien struggles to believe that he would be strong enough to pull it off and says he needs a little more time to think about it. After apologizing for putting him on the spot, they all promise to support him regardless of what he decides. While having breakfast the following day, the girls suggest going shopping for new equipment so Rien can fully harness the powers he gained from them. Shortly after that, they all head into town, but the twins get worried about being around so many humans and grab onto his arm for protection. When Sora promises to protect Runa at all cost, Rien reminds them that not all humans are evil, but they still decide to keep their guard up in case a dangerous creep notices. Just then, two Uglian Peaks call out to Tanya and remind her that they were the first to get manhandled when she first arrived on the bridge. The skinny thug then tries to say that he knows her true identity, but his beefy friend pushes him away and says they just wanted to show respect for her incredible power. Tanya then accepts their gratings and promises to fight them again if they manage to get stronger. The next moment, a fruit seller offers Canade an apple as a token of appreciation for helping her move all her stuff. This causes the twins to realize that being around humans might not be so bad, but then three of Rien's local fans suddenly show up to talk, so they both prepare to fight them off. However, after calling Rien a Riz master for bagging so many baddies without even trying, one of the girls starts gushing over how pretty the twins look. Sora then thanks her for the compliment, but Runa decides that it would be the perfect opportunity to show off how amazing she is. The moment she tries to activate a spell, her wings become visible, so Rien and Sora immediately shut her mouth and walk away as fast as they can before reminding her that humans can't figure out what they actually are. Several minutes later, they arrive at an equipment store and Stoloff, the owner, welcomes them with a mean grin. After he tells Rien to take a look around and pick what he wants, Runa finds a whip and explains how he can use it for a 50 Shades role play with them later on. While Sora starts beating her up for always coming up with something freaky, Rien picks up a dagger but notices something weird as soon as he pulls it out of the cover. Just then, a random adventurer walks in and demands the best sword money can buy before tossing a fat bag of coins to Stoloff. This causes Sora to get even more upset, but he hides his anger and picks out a fancy-looking sword for Mr. Spends a Lot. After acting like the sword is the most powerful one he has ever touched, the adventurer walks off. But then Rien asks Stoloff if that was really the best sword he had. Stoloff then asks if he is accusing him of something, so Rien explains how every weapon he has on display is basic and only looks fancy to attract inexperienced customers. When he suddenly starts laughing and commends Rien's ability to notice something so simple, the twins call him a scammer, but he assures them that every weapon on display is sold at the right price. After he unveils his secret collection, Rien immediately notices how strong they all are and asks why he hides them away from the public, so Stoloff explains how all the new generation adventurers treat his prized creation like scrap metal the moment they find something fancy. He goes on to tell them about the painfully long process of crafting powerful swords and convinces them that his scam operation is the only way to make sure only true warriors gain access to high-quality weapons. He then commends Rien on seeing through the facade again and asks how he did it so easily because even some high-ranked adventurers still fall victim to the scam. After taking a moment to think about it, Rien tells him that it must be connected to his daily life as a beast tamer because he observes every detail of anything he comes across during quests. This causes Stoloff's respect for him to increase even more, so he expresses a deep desire to craft something special for him. They all get excited to hear this until Stoloff says that it won't be possible without a special ore called Mithril. Later that day, they all head to the guild, and all the commotion makes them curious, so Rien asks Natalie if there's something important going on. When she tells them that Arios is recruiting new members into his party, Canade and Tanya notice Rien's sudden mood swing, but he starts rubbing their heads and promises that he is over it. Natalie then asks who the twins are to him, and Runa immediately cooks up a story about how he likes to get freaky with the both of them. As Natalie starts freaking out and fears that he has been a P-diff this entire time, he hands over a special mission request to change the topic. After Stoloff told them that he needed Mithril to craft powerful swords, they tried to figure out a way to find it, but he told them not to worry about that because his father passed down a whole mine loaded with Mithril. However, he had recently noticed that all the Mithril went missing and couldn't do anything about it, so Rien offered to go investigate with the girls on his behalf. Stoloff then thanked him for being so considerate and asked how many gold coins they would charge, but Rien only asked him to craft a powerful sword if they managed to retrieve the lost Mithril. After receiving approval from Natalie to go on the mission, they all set out to find the mine. but after almost an hour of walking through the scorching heat, the twins start to melt. When they explain how weak their species actually is, Reen spots a lake, and they beg him for a swim break, so he agrees to it as long as they make it quick. Just then, Canade tries to strip without realizing that he is still there, so he quickly leaves and creates a contract with 2 squirrels to watch over them before proceeding to take a nap. Moments later, the twins get jealous of Canade and Tanya's plot, and when Runa starts demanding to know how they got so big, Stora chases her around the lake to stop her tantrums. The next moment, Canade feels something on her no-no spot and screams, so Reen immediately rushes toward the lake to save her, only to see that it's just a fish trying to munch on her tail. Upon realizing that he also just saw everything they were trying to hide, he begs for their forgiveness, but they end up being really cool about it and even try to get one last swim with him. Luckily, he avoids their freaky plans to focus on the mission. But when they finally get to the mine, he notices a bird flying around in a weird pattern. Just then, 2 guys walk out and start asking for a fight, so Reen tells Canade and Tanya to go easy so he can interrogate them. Unfortunately, their immense strength ends up being a little too much for the weak losers, so the twins offer to look through their memories instead. After they learn that it's an entire operation dedicated to stealing Stoloff's Mithril, Reen decides to go stop the others and says they are already waiting because the weird bird from before was being controlled by a beast tamer. As they start walking into the mine, the thieving adventurers welcome them with a deadly fireball, but the twins easily block it and decide to show Reen just how useful they can be. After they combine their powers to capture the magic users, 2 Green Arrow fanboys try to take them down, but Tanya reduces their arrows to ash before Canade knocks them out. Reen then tells the beast tamer to accept defeat, but he refuses and tries to stab him, so Reen lands a brutal body shot to weaken him. However, he still refuses to surrender and summons a behemoth, which leaves everyone stunned because such a powerful monster should be way too much for a regular beast tamer. Upon seeing the shocked look on their faces, the beast tamer explains how he raised the behemoth since it was little to make sure it was only loyal to him. After he sends it to attack them, Reen distracts it long enough for the girls to get everyone out safely. But Tanya notices how worried Canade gets, so she tells her to go help him out. By then, Reen, who just got hit by a huge chunk of earth, struggles to move out of the way, so Canade pulls him away and suggests a team-up to defeat the behemoth. Instead of going along with her plan, he tells her to capture the beast tamer since he is the one controlling the behemoth. When she finally grabs a hold of him, Reen kindly asks him to stop his rampaging pet, but he refuses and says he would rather lose his life. Reen then realizes that he won't be last long with only evasive maneuvers, so he decides to try something extremely risky and stops right in front of the beast. After the Psycho Tamer orders it to smash his skull, it tries to attack, but Reen suddenly activates a contract and becomes its new master. The Psycho Tamer struggles to believe his eyes upon seeing this, and Reen admits that it took a great deal of energy. But then the Tamer loses it again and starts barking orders at the behemoth. Reen then tries to stop him because the beast might go berserk, but he continues until the behemoth returns to its natural state. After Reen quickly claps it with a fireball, they tie up the Psycho Tamer with the rest of his thieving comrades. Later that day, they get back to Stoloff's store and explain that they were only trying to take revenge on him for the low-quality weapons he sold to them. This causes him to realize that pulling a scam on his main customers wasn't such a good idea, and Reen agrees that his actions were completely stupid. However, he then tells him to focus on making it right by crafting only high-quality weapons for everyone regardless of how they choose to treat it. After promising to do better, Stoloff decides to start by making any weapon he wants, so Reen asks for a gauntlet and dagger before asking the girls if they are down for another break. Several minutes after sundown, Arios turns down another candidate trying to join the party, and when the beast tamer asks why, Arios explains how useless he will be in battle because he can only tame one creature and can't even fight. The beast tamer then reminds him that their job is only to tame animals and further explains that it's impossible for any beast tamer to handle more than one animal, but this only causes Arios to get even more repulsed by him. When he finally sends him away, Mina tells him that there are no other candidates and begins to worry about their mission because Arios spent the whole day turning down perfectly good tamers just because none of them were on the same level as Reen. She then summons the courage to tell him that not all the beast tamers were bad, but upon seeing the look on his face, she quickly changes her attitude and commends him on being such an amazing hero. After saying that Agath and Lean will probably find someone good enough to join them, he tells her to go get some rest, so she thanks him for being so considerate and turns to leave. However, just as she reaches the door, she reminds him to also get some rest because he has a world to save, but after she leaves, he pulls out a ring filled with dark magic and decides to murk Reen at all costs. At the guild the following day, Natalie tells Rian not to worry about the Psycho Tamer and his friends because they were stripped of their license and will spend a long time paying for their crimes. Moments later, the twins notice his sour mood, and when he explains what happened, they tell him to stop beating himself up because they gave him no choice. This causes him to feel a little better, so he decides to take them on a walk through town. After stopping by a hot dog stand to give them their first taste of the good stuff, they find a bench to sit on, but the twins get back up as soon as they finish eating to ask if he has noticed anything different in his abilities. The sudden question confuses him, so they remind him of the change in power level he experienced after taming Tanya and Canade before asking if he noticed anything after taming them. He then takes a moment to really think about it, but ends up crushing their hopes when he claims to feel no different than before they met. After he rubs their heads and says he doesn't choose his friends by what they can do for him, they ask why he is still being so kind to them when they are actually useless compared to Tanya and Canade. Upon realizing how insecure they are, he decides to explain his experience with Arios in detail to make them understand why he values trust way more than skills and abilities. The pep talk causes them to become cheery again, so they decide to get another round of food, but on the way back, they run into a weirdly dressed geek named Edgar who immediately tells the twins that he wants to make them his new pleasure maids. After they call him stupid for thinking they would actually go with him, Rian asks who he is, so he reveals that his father is the lord of the town and once again orders the girls to follow him. When Rian says he will never let them be taken against their will, Edgar sends his knights to capture them, but Rian quickly knocks most of them out. After the ones left back away from him, Rian tells Edgar to accept the loss, but he decides to go even further and holds all the locals hostage. Rian then reminds him that they are the subjects he is meant to protect, but he says they are nothing but worthless tools and threatens to start chopping heads if the girls don't leave with him. When they both offer to take him down with their abilities, Rian stops them because revealing who they are would mean they can no longer experience a regular life. The next moment, he suddenly remembers a powerful spell and creates multiple portals at once before lighting up the knights until they run away with Edgar. All the locals then gather around to praise him, and while he starts a conversation to make sure everyone is okay, Arios gets excited to begin his plan. Later on, Sora and Runa describe how amazing Rian was to Tanya and Canade before saying that he definitely got the multiplying skill from them. When Tanya asks how Edgar can get away with something so sinister, Rian explains how he likes to pick up random girls and lock them up in his father's mansion for his own pleasure. Runa then says that he probably uses his father's power to avoid any trouble, so Tanya offers to burn the entire mansion down and put a stop to his madness. After Rian tells her to relax, she tells him that they have to do something because Edgar will likely be back for the twins and him as well. While trying to think of a solution, he considers leaving the town with them, but they catch on to what he is thinking and remind him that he doesn't have to take on the responsibility of protecting them by himself. He then thanks them for the support and agrees to make a move before Edgar gets a chance to strike again. Hours later, Edgar's dad reminds him to ask for help if he ever needs it, and after he walks out, Edgar calls a knight named Gillet to make sure he has taken care of any complaints from the locals. After tossing him a fat bag of gold coins, he asks for every detail he can find on Rian and also tells him to arrest him on sight. As soon as Gillet leaves, Edgar rings his summoning bell and a girl named Nina immediately answers, only to end up becoming his human sandbag. The next day, Rian and Canade find the Order of Knights HQ, but just as he tries to file a complaint against Edgar, a bunch of knights show up to tell him that accusing the Lord's son is the same as committing treason. Canade then tries to tell them what he did, but Rian stops her and waits until they leave before telling her that they are working with him. The next moment, they sense someone in the alley right before a knight named Stella reveals herself and apologizes for stalking them. Her humility surprises Rian, but the real shock sets in when she says she is the vice captain of the Order of Knights. After they introduce themselves, she breathes a sigh of relief and says she already heard about them from the time they took down an entire army of bandits. She then explains how the entire order became corrupt after their captain Gillet started taking bribes from Edgar and his dad, and asks for their help exposing the injustice being done to the locals. Rian still struggles to believe that one of the knights is actually good, but Canade assures him that she is one of the good ones, so he agrees to help. When Canade asks if they can go arrest Edgar, Stella reminds her that they can't do anything without proof, so Rian decides to set a trap for the knights. After locating an empty barn later that day, Rian stops by Stoloff's shop to get his weapon before meeting up with the Stella after sundown for the mission. At the same time, Gillet, who has already assembled his corrupt knights, explains how he received word that proof of their misdeeds was being kept in the barn. He then orders them to make sure nothing incriminating leaves the barn, but as soon as they walk in, a flurry of arrows take out half of the squad, so Gillett orders a retreat only to find that they just got locked in by the twins. After taking out all the knights, Rien aims for Gillett, but he senses the attack coming and blocks it before spotting the both of them. Stella then decides to finish him off and tries to remind him of the importance of upholding the law while clashing swords. Her goody two-shoes speech only causes him to get pissed, so he knocks her down, but she manages to pull herself back up and decides to accept that he will never be the sweet innocent knight she once knew. After she defeats him, Edgar hears about it and takes his anger out on Nina before remembering that he has over 100 personal guards keeping him safe. Just then, Arios shows up on his window and explains how much he also hates Rien before giving him the dark magic ring and telling him to clap their mutual enemy. Several minutes later, Stella arrives at Edgar's family mansion with her knights and orders the soldiers stationed there to move so they can investigate the mansion for proof of Edgar's misdeeds. When the soldiers refuse and ask for Gillett, Tanya, and Canade show up and explain how amazing Stella is before giving the soldiers one last chance to cooperate. After they respond by calling out every soldier in the estate, the girls get excited to test out their skills. Meanwhile, Edgar, who has been watching from his office, decides to take Tanya and Canade after unaliving Rien with the ring before wondering why he didn't show up with them. Just then, Rien sneaks into the mansion with the twins and discusses their plan to save all the hostages so Edgar won't have any leverage when they try to arrest him. Runa gets a little too excited to save the day, so Sora reminds her that they have to be as quiet as possible until all the kidnapped civilians make it to safety. They both then activate a spell to track the energy signatures of all the hostages, but after locating them, Sora suddenly gets worried because she just picked up a particularly powerful energy signature as strong as their own. This causes Rien to reconsider the plan since it could be a powerful hostage or a secret weapon Edgar plans to use against them. But he ultimately decides to go check it out on his own and tells them to focus on evacuating the regular hostages. Upon hearing this, the girls get worried and try to go with him instead, but he rubs their heads and promises to be careful. Moments later, he reaches a hallway and spots an old door at the end, so he slowly walks over and finds a cell inside. After taking a closer look, he sees Mina on the floor and realizes that she is a demigod, one of the most powerful ultimate species, so he breaks the padlock and rushes inside to heal her. She initially fears that he might be like Edgar, but after he heals her and says he just wants to help, she falls into his arms and starts crying. Months ago, Edgar found her after raiding her hometown, but as he tried to grab her, her shield almost roasted his arm off, so he threatened to behead all the locals if she continued to resist. Left with no other choice, she begged him to stop and agreed to go with him, but then he made her put on a slave collar to stop her powers and immediately started shattering her insides with brutal kicks. After Rien commends her on being kind enough to sacrifice herself for the people in her hometown, he decides to destroy the slave collar, but she stops him and says it's way too dangerous. He then tells her not to worry, but as soon as he tries to break it, he gets attacked by a deadly electrical field, so she tells him to give up and accept that she is not worth the risk. However, he once again assures her that he will be okay and channels all the abilities he gained from the girls before finally destroying the collar. By then, Canade and Tanya have just piled up nearly all the soldiers, so the rest try to bring out the hostages to gain leverage. But the twins blast them all away and tell the other not to worry because they already evacuated everyone. As Tanya and Canade decide to go all out, Stella starts heading into the mansion to arrest Edgar and his dad, who then runs into his office to ask why for a way out. After Edgar tells him to escape first and promises to handle everything, he runs off, but by the time he reaches the stairs, Rien and the girls show up to arrest him. As soon as Rien captures him, Edgar releases the Reaper dwelling in Arios' dark ring, and after it stabs Rien in the heart, Arios becomes convinced that the mission was a success and takes off. However, Rien manages to survive without a single scratch, which leaves everyone confused until Runa reminds them that he only gained one ability from their contract, which didn't make sense since it should be two. After telling them about a magic nullifying skill possessed by fairies, she suddenly attacks him with a cloud of poison to prove that he gained the ability. While Sora starts strangling her for doing something so reckless, Edgar loses all hope and becomes consumed by hatred, causing the dark entity in the ring to gain enough strength to escape. As they all watch in horror, it swallows him whole, so Rien quickly blasts it with a fireball to stop it from growing, but after the dust settles, a demon breaks out of the cocoon. Seeing it up close reminds Rien that a similar demon was responsible for what happened to his village, and as he suddenly becomes terrified, the demon promises to destroy everything they love. after it takes off to start destroying the town. Reen fears that such a battle might be too much for the girls, but upon seeing the excited looks on their faces, he remembers that they live for combat and decides to go stop the demon. Just then, Nina asks if she can tag along, but he tells her to stay safe inside since she is probably too weak to deal with such a deadly opponent. Moments later, the demon starts exploding random houses and laughs at how weak the locals look until Canade drops him with a mighty kick. Upon seeing them all gathered together to fight, he gets excited and admits that passing time with them might be a little more interesting than blowing everything up. But Reen assures him that it won't go so easy before Canade lands an even stronger kick. After Tanya also attacks him, Reen uses his gauntlet to tie him up, but he easily breaks free and mocks them for thinking such a cheap weapon could hold him down. Reen then says it was just a distraction before the twins activate a powerful spell above his head and unleash a deadly explosion. The next moment, he casually walks out like nothing happened and summons an army of monsters to even things out, but the girls easily destroy every monster in a matter of seconds. When he summons a second wave and says he can do it all day, Canade resumes her attack on monsters, but then the demon uses that opportunity to blast her away. While Tanya immediately unleashes her dragon breath to block any surprise attacks, Reen rushes over to check on Canade, but by the time she gets back up, Tanya also gets blasted. However, unlike Canade, she gets back up the moment Reen tries to check on her, so the demon commends her strength level before sending shots to every corner of town and laughing at how easy it is to destroy their homes. After Reen uses his multiple fireball skill to distract him, the twins hold him in place with a flaming sword, and Reen quickly boosts both Canade and Tanya's abilities to the max. They both then combine their powers to shatter every bone in the demon's body, and after the twins blast him into mid-air, Canade lands a spine-shattering punch to finish him off. Despite this, the demon only loses a part of his horn and summons an even larger army of monsters to keep them occupied while he takes off to destroy everything. Reen suddenly finds himself in a mental battle as he tries to think of a solution that stops the demon while protecting all the locals who are now at the mercy of his monster army. The twins notice his distress and remind him of their teleportation magic before saying that they don't care if everyone figures out their true identities. While they start evacuating the locals, Mina asks Arios why they haven't left to fight the demon, and when he claims it's because their only job is to face the Demon King, Agath reminds him that they have a duty to the people as well. He then asks if they are threatening his great wisdom, so they reluctantly agree to back down, and he continues watching the town burn with the hope that Reen's body burns along with it. Minutes later, Stella's knights start losing hope, so she takes a moment to deliver a pep talk before the twins catch up to her and ask for help gathering the civilians so they can teleport them to safety. After she and the other knights get all the people left to an open spot by the woods, the girls create a portal, but the people realize that they are fairies and fear that it might be a trap. Just then, the hot dog seller recognizes them from the other day and says there is no way they can be evil before walking into the portal. When the girl who saw them on the day they first entered the city also says they can be trusted, everyone else decides to enter the portal. Meanwhile, Canade and Tanya continue battling the endless swarm of monsters while Reen desperately tries to figure out a plan to get close enough to the demon. The next moment, every adventurer in town shows up with swords to join the fight and ends up clearing a path for Reen and the girls to get closer. Canade then asks Tanya if she can fly Reen up to the demon in her dragon form, but she claims it will only make it easier for him to shoot them down since she would basically become one big target. Just as they realize that the only way is to teleport him right in front of the demon, Nina hugs Reen and says she wants to help like everyone else. Canade and Tanya then remember that demigods have even higher levels of magic than fairies, so Reen explains the new plan to Nina to make sure she can pull it off. As another wave of monsters rush toward them, Canade and Tanya decide to hold them off. So Reen uses his gauntlet to get up to the roofs with Nina and evades all the demon's attacks until they get to the roof closest to him. After saying that jumping around like Spider-Man won't help him win, the demon powers up for his most powerful blast, but as soon as he lets it off, Nina teleports Reen right in front of him. Before giving him a chance to process what just happened, Reen yanks off his arm and boosts his magic before capturing him and trying to absorb his energy. The plan suddenly takes a dark turn as Reen begins to feel overwhelmed by the demon's dark aura, but then he focuses on all the strength he had received from the girls and manages to completely absorb his powers. He then gains control of his monster army and forces them to attack him until all that's left is his head. With one last ounce of strength, the demon asks for his name, but Reen refuses and watches as he becomes pixie dust. Days later, repairs commence across town, so Reen and the girls join the work to make sure everyone returns to their normal lives as soon as possible. At the hotel the following day, Nina asks Reen if she can join the family, and he immediately accepts before saying that he might not be able to tame another ultimate species. However, after taking one look at the others, his confidence skyrockets, so he initiates the ritual and easily seals the contract with her. Later on, they all go to the guild and get surprised when they see Stella. Serene asks why the new captain of the Order of Knights is spending time around adventurers. Stella then explains how she plans on combining the Order of Knights with the guilds so they can do a better job of protecting everyone in town. After she thanks Reen for everything he did to bring about this new peaceful era, Natalie asks for a moment of his time to share some amazing news. At a table moments later, she congratulates him on getting promoted to rank C, and when he asks why they skipped D, she reminds him of all the epic battles and quests he has conquered recently and says he should have received an even higher rank. He then says that it's all because he had help from the girls, but they tell him to accept the praises for once and stop being so humble all the time. When Natalie also tells him about the insanely huge rewards waiting for him, he decides to celebrate the promotion with a feast. The next moment, she notices Nina and asks if he has increased his harem again, before realizing that she is a demigod and asking if it's safe to touch her. As soon as he says yes, she pounces on Nina to play with her fur, and after the others also join her, Reen explains that she is the reason they came out because their room at the hotel is now too small to serve as a base. Natalie then reveals that the guild also serves as a real estate broker for adventurers and suggests getting a house instead of looking for bigger hotels. After remembering that he now has enough funds to ball out, he agrees to get a house, so they spend the rest of the day looking through countless houses and almost lose hope because they are all either old or ugly. Just as Reen considers giving up for the day, Natalie takes them to one last house that ends up being perfect for all their needs, but they suddenly get suspicious and ask why she didn't start with it. Upon realizing that she can't lie her way out of this one, Natalie tells them that a ghost has been scaring off anyone that tries to buy the place. This terrifies Canade, so she runs behind Reen for protection and explains how scared she is of ghosts. When Sora asks about the kind of things people experience in the house, Natalie lists out a bunch of beginner-level pranks, but makes it sound a lot worse than it actually is. While Canade continues freaking out, Reen decides to at least take a look around the house so they can see what all the hype is about. After Natalie decides to hang back in case they get pranked into the afterlife, Reen leads them into the house and tries to find a sign of paranormal activity until they get to the living room. When all the furniture suddenly starts shaking, Canade nearly experiences a heart attack, but her fears only increase when the ghost, who turns out to be a smoking hot maid, appears. The twins immediately try to attack her, but it passes through her body, so they try to think of a phantom spell before noticing that all Tina can do is shout and move stuff around. After realizing that they are not scared of her, she decides to traumatize Canade even more, but at a certain point, Canade passes out and transforms into a psychotic ghost buster. She then turns the tables and chases Tina all over the house until the twins create a phantom barrier in the living room to trap her. Reen then tries to have a conversation, but she decides to possess him, so he tames her and explains how he also learned ghost taming in his village. After he pins her to the ground, she gives up and tells him to do whatever he wants, but he reminds her that they just wanted to talk. Moments later, she properly introduces herself and explains how her creepy boss unlived her 30 years ago in a completely different town. When they ask how she got here, she claims to have just chosen it after flying around for a while and says she doesn't mind leaving if they can't handle living with a ghost. However, after Canade promises to get along with her eventually, Reen welcomes her to stay because they could actually use her expertise to get the house up and running. Hours later, Reen returns to the guild with Canade and Natalie to complete the buying process before heading out to get groceries for the housewarming party. Around the same time, Arios and his party of spineless losers also decide to shop for groceries, and, like always, he tells the seller to put it on his tab and be grateful that the great hero is shopping from him. When the shop owner tells him to try his games somewhere else, Arios reminds him that it's a sin to refuse the hero's requests, but the seller loses it and asks if he is hiding the hero under his cheap cape. After he also asks why they didn't try to help when the demon attacked, Lean tries to support him, but another seller tells them to forget about buying anything from them. As everyone gathers and starts calling them a bunch of pathetic cowards who could never become as strong as Reen, Arios attacks the fruit stand and walks off with his blood boiling over. Meanwhile, Reen and Canade finally return with groceries, so they all spend the rest of the evening preparing before having a feast to celebrate the new house. The sight of so many happy faces around him causes Reen to remember where it all started, so he sheds a tear, and when they all ask if he is okay, he blames it on the food and asks for more. Will Arios ever get strong enough to take his revenge on Reen, or will our favorite MC continue stacking baddies and abilities until he gets tired? Comment part 2 to find out, and don't forget to turn on post notifications after subscribing so you never miss any of our recaps.